She walked in wearing a floral dress and got laughed at. By the end of the quarter, she owned the building. Welcome to Tales by Orion. Let's uncover what really happened. The polished marble lobby of Innovatech Solutions gleamed under the cool, recessed lighting, a testament to cutting-edge design and corporate ambition. It was a space that hummed with a quiet, purposeful energy, the air thick with the scent of expensive coffee and the subtle, almost subliminal, whir of unseen technology. Employees, clad in the unofficial uniform of the tech elite, sharp, minimalist attire in muted tones, moved with a brisk, confident stride, their faces illuminated by the glow of smartphones, their conversations punctuated by industry jargon and the casual dropping of seven-figure projections. Into this sleek, self-assured world stepped Alara Meadows, a figure as out of place as a wildflower in a hydroponic garden. She was 24, fresh from a small, rural town nestled in a valley so remote it barely registered on most GPS systems. Her dress, a modest floral print that had seemed perfectly appropriate back home, now felt homespun and conspicuously bright amidst the sea of charcoals and navies. Her shoes, sensible flats chosen for comfort rather than style, squeaked almost imperceptibly on the polished floor, a sound that seemed to echo her own internal discomfort. She clutched a worn leather satchel, a hand-me-down from her grandfather, its contents a mixture of freshly sharpened pencils, a dog-eared notebook filled with innovative, if unconventional, software architecture diagrams, and a heart full of a nervous, hopeful trepidation. Today was Alara's first day at Innovatech. She had been hired, much to her own astonishment, for a junior programmer position, a role secured through a series of grueling online interviews and coding challenges that had tested the limits of her self-taught skills. She had aced them all, her solutions elegant, efficient, and infused with a creativity that had clearly intrigued someone in Innovatech's anonymous HR department. She knew, intellectually, that she belonged here, that her abilities had earned her this opportunity. But her heart, currently performing a frantic drum solo against her ribs, hadn't quite gotten the memo. The sheer scale of the building, the impersonal gleam of its surfaces, the confident, almost predatory energy of its inhabitants. It was all a world away from the quiet rhythms of her hometown, from the familiar comfort of her small attic room where she had spent countless hours coaxing lines of code into elegant, functional life. As she approached the imposing reception desk, a monolith of brushed steel and frosted glass, the receptionist, a young woman with an impeccably styled asymmetrical haircut and an air of bored, unassailable superiority, looked up from her monitor, her gaze sweeping over Alara with a cool, dismissive appraisal that made Alara feel suddenly, acutely, aware of her slightly too bright dress and her sensible, squeaky shoes. "Can I help you?" the receptionist inquired, her voice a perfectly modulated, anodyne chime that somehow managed to convey both professional courtesy and utter disinterest. Alara swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. "Yes, good morning," she stammered, her voice softer than she intended. "My name is Alara Meadows. It's my first day. I'm a new junior programmer." The receptionist's perfectly plucked eyebrow arched a fraction of an inch. "Meadows," she repeated, tapping a few keys on her sleek, minimalist keyboard. "Ah, yes. You're with Mr. Harrison's team. 4th floor, C wing. You'll need a temporary badge." She slid a Generoplastic card across the counter without making eye contact, her attention already drifting back to her screen. "Elevators are to your left. Someone from HR should have sent you the onboarding packet." Alara picked up the badge, her fingers fumbling slightly. "Thank you," she murmured, but the receptionist was already engrossed in her work, Alara's presence seemingly forgotten. Feeling a fresh wave of awkwardness and a growing sense of invisibility, Alara turned towards the bank of gleaming elevators, her worn satchel clutched to her chest like a shield. The journey to the 4th floor was a silent, unnerving ascent in a glass-walled lift that offered breathtaking and somewhat terrifying views of the city sprawling below. When she finally located C wing, it was a vast, open-plan office, a sea of identical cubicles separated by low, gray partitions, the air filled with the quiet, relentless clatter of keyboards and the low hum of hushed, important-sounding conversations. No one looked up as she entered. She felt like an intruder, a foreign microbe in a sterile, perfectly balanced ecosystem. She clutched her temporary badge, its generic visitor label feeling like a brand, and wondered, with a sinking heart, how she would ever find her place in this gleaming, impersonal, and utterly intimidating new world. Her floral dress suddenly felt like a beacon of inappropriate rural exuberance, her sensible shoes a declaration of her utter lack of urban sophistication. The dream job, the one she had worked so hard for, the one that represented her escape from the limitations of her small town, suddenly felt less like an opportunity and more like a terrifying, insurmountable challenge. The quiet confidence she had felt during her online interviews, the thrill of solving complex coding problems, seemed to have evaporated in the face of this overwhelming, alien environment. She was a wildflower, indeed, and she had a sinking feeling she was about to be trampled under the expensive, impeccably styled heels of Innovatech Solutions. Alara finally located what she presumed to be Mr. Harrison's section, a cluster of cubicles at the far end of the open-plan office, distinguished only by a slightly larger, slightly more cluttered, corner cubicle that presumably belonged to the team lead himself. She hovered uncertainly at the entrance to the area, her temporary badge clutched in her hand, feeling a fresh wave of self-consciousness wash over her. A few heads turned, curious glances flickered her way, then quickly dismissed her, their attention returning to the glowing screens that seemed to command their entire existence. Eventually, a young man with artfully tousled hair, a t-shirt bearing the logo of some obscure indie band, and an air of weary, seen-it-all cynicism, sauntered over. "You lost, or just admiring the architectural monotony?" he inquired, his voice laced with an apathetic drawl. Alara swallowed. No. I'm Alara Meadows. It's my first day. I'm looking for Mr. Harrison." The young man's eyes swept over her, taking in her floral dress, her sensible shoes, her worn satchel, with an expression that hovered somewhere between amusement and pity. "Harrison, huh? Brave soul." He jerked a thumb towards the corner cubicle. "He's in there, probably wrestling with the Q4 projections or contemplating the existential dread of another Monday. Name's Alex, by the way. Welcome to the digital chain gang." He offered a lazy, ironic salute and sauntered back to his own cubicle, leaving Alara feeling even more adrift. Taking a deep breath, Alara approached Mr. Harrison's cubicle. It was indeed slightly larger and significantly more chaotic than the others. Piles of printouts teetered precariously on every available surface. A collection of empty coffee cups stood sentinel on one corner, and a whiteboard, covered in a frantic scrawl of equations and flowcharts, dominated one wall. Mr. Harrison himself, a man in his late 40s with a receding hairline, a perpetually harried expression, and eyes that seemed to be permanently focused on some distant, problematic line of code, was hunched over his keyboard, muttering to himself. Alara cleared her throat softly. "Mr. Harrison?" He didn't look up. "Not now. Brenda, I'm debugging the mainframe's inferiority complex. And tell marketing if they ask for that Q4 report one more time, I'm replacing their kombucha with lukewarm dishwater." It's Alara Meadows, sir," Alara ventured, her voice barely a whisper. "It's my first day. Your new junior programmer." Mr. Harrison finally looked up, his eyes, magnified by thick-rimmed glasses, slowly focusing on her. He blinked, as if surprised to find a small, floral-dressed human standing in his cubicle. "Meadows? Right? The rural prodigy. HR sent your file. Impressive scores on the aptitude tests. Bit unorthodox in your approach, but impressive." He gestured vaguely towards an empty cubicle wedge between two humming servers and a filing cabinet overflowing with obsolete hardware manuals. "That's you. System access codes are on the sticky note. Onboarding packet is probably buried in your email somewhere. Find a project. Try not to break anything critical in the first week. Questions?" He rattled off the instructions with the speed and impersonal efficiency of a pre-recorded message, his attention already drifting back to his screen. Alara felt a fresh wave of despair. This was her orientation? This was her welcome to the team? She didn't know what she had expected, but it wasn't this. Yes, sir, she managed. What project should I start with? Mr. Harrison waved a dismissive hand, his eyes still glued to his code. Whatever. Find something. There's a backlog of low-priority bug fixes on the shared drive. Or if you're feeling ambitious, you could try to untangle the legacy code for the old billing system. No one else wants to touch it. It's a nest of digital vipers, probably written in COBOL by a disgruntled badger. He chuckled to himself at his own joke, then seemed to forget her presence entirely. Alara retreated to her assigned cubicle, a small, sterile box that smelled faintly of stale coffee and disillusionment. The sticky note with her access codes was, indeed, there, stuck haphazardly to a dusty monitor. She logged in, her fingers fumbling on the unfamiliar keyboard. The onboarding packet was a labyrinthine collection of corporate jargon, HR policies, and dire warnings about intellectual property theft. She tried to find the backlog of low-priority bug fixes, but the shared drive was a chaotic, disorganized mess, a digital landfill of forgotten projects and abandoned initiatives. She felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. She was adrift, alone, in a vast, indifferent ocean of code and corporate culture. The confidence that had carried her through the online interviews, the quiet pride in her self-taught skills, felt like a distant, foolish memory. As the morning wore on, her sense of isolation only deepened. No one spoke to her. No one offered assistance. She heard snippets of conversation from nearby cubicles, discussions of weekend rock-climbing trips, complaints about the quality of the cafeteria sushi, debates about the latest programming languages, but it was all a foreign, exclusionary dialect. She was an outsider, an interloper, her floral dress a garish symbol of her otherness. Around mid-morning, a group of young, impeccably dressed employees, clearly the office in crowd, gathered near the communal coffee machine, their laughter loud and confident. As Alara walked past, on her way to refill her water bottle, she heard a snatch of their conversation. "Did you see the new girl?" One of them, a young woman with a razor-sharp bob and an expression of perpetual amusement, stage whispered, just loud enough for Alara to hear. "The one who looks like she wandered in from a quilting bee?" Her companion snickered. "Seriously." Another chimed in, a young man with a perfectly sculpted beard and an air of effortless cool. What was HR thinking? Does she even know what a recursive algorithm is? Or is she going to try to darn the bugs out of the code? The laughter that followed was like a physical blow. Alara felt her face burn, her eyes sting. She hurried past, her gaze fixed on the floor, her heart pounding with a mixture of shame, anger, and a profound, aching loneliness. She had expected challenges, of course. She had expected to have to prove herself. But she hadn't expected this casual cruelty, this effortless, unthinking dismissal. She reached her cubicle, her hands trembling, and sank in her chair, the bright, cheerful floral pattern of her dress suddenly feeling like a costume, a ridiculous, naive statement in this world of sleek, cynical sophistication. The dream job was rapidly devolving into a nightmare. And it was only her first day. The rest of Alara's first day at Innovatech Solutions unfolded in a similar vein of quiet humiliation and mounting despair. She attempted to tackle the low-priority bug fixes, but the codebase was a tangled, undocumented mess, and without any guidance or context, she felt like she was fumbling in the dark. She tried to ask a question of a nearby programmer, a young woman who seemed slightly less intimidating than the others, but was met with a curt, dismissive, "Can't you see I'm busy? Figure out yourself. That's what they pay us the big bucks for, right?" The big bucks, Alara thought wryly, were certainly not evident in her own starting salary, which was barely enough to cover the rent on the tiny, windowless room she had found in a less than salubrious part of the city. Lunchtime arrived, and Alara found herself adrift in the bustling, gleaming corporate cafeteria. It was a cacophony of clattering trays, loud conversations, and the scent of a dozen different international cuisines, none of which looked particularly appealing or affordable. She saw the group who had mocked her earlier, holding court at a prime table near the window, their laughter echoing through the space. She quickly averted her gaze, her appetite vanishing, and settled for a dry sandwich and a bottle of water, consumed in the relative anonymity of a deserted corner table. The afternoon was a continuation of the morning's frustrations. Mr. Harrison remained ensconced in his cubicle, emerging only for a brief, harried trip to the coffee machine, during which he failed to even acknowledge Ilara's presence. The few colleagues she tentatively tried to engage with either ignored her or offered unhelpful, jargon-laden responses that left her feeling more confused than enlightened. She felt a growing sense of panic. She had uprooted her entire life for this job, left behind the familiar comfort of her small town, the quiet support of her aging grandparents who had raised her. She had poured all her hopes, all her dreams, into this opportunity. And now, it seemed, she was failing. Miserably. As the clock on her monitor inched towards 5, signaling the end of the official workday, Ilara felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her, an exhaustion that was more emotional than physical. She hadn't written a single line of functional code. She hadn't made a single connection. She had only managed to confirm her status as an outsider, an unwelcome anomaly in this sleek, sophisticated world. Most of the other employees began to pack up, their relief at the end of the day palpable. There were discussions of after-work drinks, yoga classes, dinner reservations at trendy new restaurants. Ilara simply sat at her desk, staring at her blank screen, the weight of her disappointment a physical ache in her chest. She felt a tear escape and trace a hot path down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, hoping no one had seen. Just as she was contemplating the bleak prospect of returning to her tiny, lonely room, a shadow fell over her cubicle. She looked up, her heart sinking, expecting another dismissive remark, another casual cruelty. It was Alex, the cynic with the indie band t-shirt, who had been the first person to speak to her that morning. He was leaning against her cubicle wall, an unreadable expression on his face. "Rough first day, huh? Quilting bee," he said, his voice still laced with its characteristic apathy. But there was something else there, too, a hint of something. Sympathy? Or just a desire to witness her complete unraveling? Ilara didn't answer, just stared at her keyboard, her vision blurring. "Look," Alex continued, his voice a little softer now. "This place is a shark tank. They eat their young, especially if their young wear floral prints." He gestured vaguely at her dress. "It's not personal. It's just the ecosystem." "Thanks," Ilara mumbled, not looking at him. "That's incredibly helpful." Alex sighed. "Okay, bad pep talk. My specialty. But seriously, don't let them get to you. Harrison's a mess, but he's not a bad guy, just overwhelmed. And the rest of them," he waved a dismissive hand, "are mostly insecure narcissists who think knowing the difference between Python and Perl makes them demigods. You got hired for a reason, Meadows. Those aptitude scores, they were off the charts. I saw the printout. You're probably smarter than half the preening peacocks in this glorified sweatshop." Ilara finally looked up, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. You saw my scores?" Alex shrugged. "I'm good at acquiring information. Look, the point is, don't let the first day define you. This place isn't about what you wear or where you come from. Or at least, it shouldn't be. It's about what you can do. So, go home, get some rest, come back tomorrow, and show them what you're made of. Or, don't. Run screaming for the hills. Probably the saner option, to be honest." He offered a small, crooked smile, a genuine, almost friendly, expression that took Ilara by surprise. "If you decide to stick it out," he added, his voice dropping conspiratorially, "that legacy billing system Harrison mentioned, the nest of digital vipers? It's actually a fascinating piece of archaic spaghetti code. A real puzzle. Might be right up your unorthodox alley." With another ironic salute, he sauntered off, leaving Ilara staring after him, a strange mixture of emotions churning within her. His words, though laced with cynicism, had contained a surprising, almost unwelcome, kernel of encouragement. A puzzle. a nest of digital vipers. It was a challenge. And despite the misery of her first day, despite the casual cruelty, despite the overwhelming sense of alienation, a tiny, stubborn spark of her old, problem-solving spirit flickered back to life. Perhaps Alex was right. Perhaps she shouldn't let them break her. Not yet. Alara did not run screaming for the hills. The next morning, she returned to Innovatech Solutions, her floral dress exchanged for a pair of simple, dark trousers and a plain blouse. A small concession to the corporate aesthetic, but one that made her feel slightly less like a target. She still clutched her grandfather's worn leather satchel, a tangible link to her roots, to the quiet, steadfast values of her upbringing. She had spent a restless night, Alex's unexpected words replaying in her mind. You got hired for a reason. Show them what you're made of. And then, the challenge, that legacy billing system, a real puzzle. A puzzle. Alara loved puzzles. She thrived on them. The more complex, the more intractable, the better. It was the intricate dance of logic, the thrill of uncovering hidden patterns, the quiet satisfaction of bringing order out of chaos that had drawn her to coding in the first place. So instead of returning to the demoralizing backlog of low-priority bug fixes, Alara made a decision. She would tackle the beast. She would venture into the nest of digital vipers. She found the access point to the legacy billing system, a dusty, forgotten server tucked away in a corner of the server room, humming with a mournful, almost arthritic energy. The code, when she finally managed to load onto her terminal, was even worse than Harrison had described. It was a labyrinthine monstrosity, a relic from a bygone era of programming, written in a patchwork of obsolete languages, its logic convoluted, its documentation non-existent. It was indeed a masterpiece of spaghetti code, a testament to years of ad hoc fixes, rushed updates, and a fundamental lack of architectural vision. Most programmers would have recoiled in horror. Alara felt a strange thrill of anticipation. This was a challenge worthy of her skills, a puzzle that would demand all her ingenuity, all her patience, all her unorthodox creativity. She began her work not by trying to fix anything, but by trying to understand. She printed out sections of the code, spreading them across her small desk, her brow furrowed in concentration, her lips moving silently as she traced the labyrinthine pathways of its logic. She drew diagrams in her notebook, mapping out the connections, the dependencies, the hidden fault lines. She was like an archaeologist, carefully brushing away layers of digital dust, trying to unearth the original intent, the underlying structure of this ancient, forgotten system. Days turned into a week, then two. Alara became a fixture in her small cubicle, often arriving before anyone else, often leaving long after the last of the office lights had been extinguished. She ate her lunch at her desk, her gaze fixed on her screen, her mind lost in the intricate complexities of the legacy code. Her colleagues mostly ignored her, content to leave her to her seemingly impossible and certainly unglamorous task. Mr. Harrison, when he remembered her existence, would occasionally peer into her cubicle, shake his head with a mixture of pity and bewilderment, and retreat to the relative sanity of his own debugging nightmares. Alex was the only one who showed any consistent interest. He would sometimes wander over, a cup of lukewarm coffee in hand, and peer over her shoulder, offering a cynical comment or a surprisingly insightful observation. He seemed to be the only one who recognized the sheer audacity, the quiet brilliance of what she was attempting. "You're actually trying to make sense of that Lovecraftian horror?" he'd asked one afternoon, his voice tinged with a reluctant admiration. Alara just smiled faintly. "It has a certain internal logic," she'd replied. "It's just very well hidden, like a shy badger." Alex had actually chuckled at that, a rare and surprising sound. He started leaving her printouts of obscure technical manuals he'd unearthed from the company's digital archives, articles on outdated programming languages, even a dog-eared copy of a textbook on reverse engineering software. He never offered direct help, never tried to impose his own solutions, but his quiet, almost grudging support was a lifeline in Alara's solitary quest. Slowly, painstakingly, Ilara began to make progress. She identified critical bottlenecks, redundancies, sections of code that were not just inefficient, but actively detrimental to the system's performance. She found bugs that had lain dormant for years, bugs that had caused countless hours of frustration for the accounting department, bugs that everyone else had dismissed as unfixable quirks of an aging system. She didn't just fix the bugs. She began to refactor the code, to streamline it, to bring a semblance of elegance and order to its chaotic, convoluted structure. She worked with a focused, almost obsessive intensity, driven by the sheer intellectual challenge, by the quiet satisfaction of solving a puzzle that had defeated so many others. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't thinking about the office politics, the condescending remarks, the floral dress. She was simply doing what she loved. She was communing with the machine, listening to its silent language, gently coaxing it back to health, to functionality, to a state of digital grace. And as she worked, something remarkable began to happen. The nest of digital vipers began to purr. The Lovecraftian horror began to reveal a strange, unexpected beauty. The shy badger, it seemed, was slowly, tentatively beginning to emerge from its den. The transformation of the legacy billing system did not go unnoticed for long. The first indication that something unusual was afoot came from the accounting department, a notoriously grumpy and overworked group who had long since resigned themselves to the daily frustrations of wrestling with the archaic, unreliable software. Suddenly, reports that used to take hours to generate were appearing in minutes. Data entry errors, once a constant plague, seemed to be miraculously correcting themselves. The system, which had been prone to crashing at the most inopportune moments, usually just before payroll was due, was now running with a smooth, almost disconcerting stability. Whispers began to circulate. Had Innovatech finally invested in a new billing system? Had a team of expensive consultants been brought in secretly to overhaul the old one? No one seemed to know. Then, Mrs. Periwinkle, the formidable head of accounting, a woman whose scowl could curdle milk and whose patience had been worn to a nub by years of battling the billing system, marched up to the fourth floor, a look of bewildered, almost suspicious, gratitude on her face. She cornered Mr. Harrison, who braced himself for the usual tirade of complaints. "Harrison," she boomed, her voice echoing through the usually hushed C-wing. "What in blazes have you done to the billing system? It's working. For the first time in a decade, it's actually working properly. I haven't had to manually reconcile a single transaction all week." Mr. Harrison stared at her, nonplussed. He hadn't done anything to the billing system. He wouldn't touch that digital minefield with a 10-foot pole. He vaguely remembered assigning it to. Who was it again? That quiet new girl, the one with the floral dress. Meadows. He'd practically forgotten about her, assumed she'd given up in despair weeks ago. Well, Mrs. Periwinkle, he stammered, we've had some of our top people looking into optimizing its performance." He cast a desperate, questioning glance towards Alex, who just shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. Mrs. Periwinkle, however, was not to be fobbed off with vague corporate platitudes. "Top people," she snorted. "For years, your top people have been telling me it's unfixable, a lost cause. Someone has performed a miracle, Harrison, and I want to know who it is. I want to shake their hand. I want to bake them a pie." The image of Mrs. Periwinkle baking a pie for anyone was so outlandish that several nearby programmers actually stopped typing. Their curiosity piqued. Mr. Harrison, flustered, finally remembered. "Ah, yes. Meadows. Ilara Meadows. Our new junior programmer. She's been familiarizing herself with the legacy code." He pointed vaguely towards Ilara's cubicle. Mrs. Periwinkle, a woman on a mission, marched toward Ilara's small, unassuming workspace. Ilara, who had been deeply engrossed in refactoring a particularly convoluted section of COBOL, looked up, startled, as the formidable figure of the head of accounting loomed over her. "Miss Meadows," Mrs. Periwinkle inquired, her voice surprisingly gentle. "Are you the one who's been taming the beast?" Ilara, flustered by the sudden attention, could only nod shyly. I, I've been trying to clean it up a bit, ma'am, she mumbled. Make it run a little smoother. Mrs. Periwinkle stared at her, at the small, unassuming young woman with the earnest eyes and the smudges of ink on her fingers. Then, she did something that no one in Sea Wing had ever witnessed before. She smiled, a genuine, heartfelt, almost dazzling smile that transformed her usually severe features. A little smoother, child, she boomed, her voice filled with a warmth that astonished everyone within earshot. You've performed open-heart surgery on that digital dinosaur. You've saved my department countless hours of frustration, countless migraines. You, my dear, are a genius. A bona fide, pie-deserving genius. She then proceeded to envelop Alara in a surprisingly strong, lavender-scented hug, much to Alara's embarrassment and the utter astonishment of the onlookers. The news of Alara's accomplishment spread through Innovatech like a benevolent virus. The rural prodigy, the quilting bee girl, had done what no one else could or would. She had not just fixed the unfixable. She had transformed it, bringing elegance and efficiency to a system that had been a byword for chaos and despair. Colleagues who had once dismissed her with a condescending smirk now approached her with a newfound respect, their voices tinged with awe. They asked for her insights on other problematic projects, sought her advice on complex coding challenges. Alara, always modest, always unassuming, shared her knowledge freely, her explanations clear, concise, and refreshingly devoid of the jargon and arrogance that often permeated the tech world. Mr. Harrison, initially bewildered, then grudgingly impressed, finally found himself filled with a profound sense of pride and not a little shame for his earlier dismissiveness. He formally assigned Alara to lead the Legacy Systems Revitalization Project, a grand-sounding title for what was essentially a one-woman mission to bring Innovatech's aging digital infrastructure into the 21st century. He gave her a larger cubicle, a faster computer, and, most importantly, his unwavering support and trust. Alex, of course, was insufferably smug. Told you she was a ringer, he'd say to anyone who would listen, a proprietary glint in his eye. He became Alara's unofficial sounding board, her cynical Sancho Panza to her quiet Don Quixote. Their friendship forged in the shared crucible of late-night coding sessions and a mutual appreciation for elegant, efficient solutions. Alara, however, remained unchanged by the sudden acclaim. She still wore her sensible shoes, though she occasionally indulged in a slightly brighter blouse. She still carried her grandfather's worn leather satchel. She still approached every problem with the same quiet determination, the same intuitive empathy, the same profound respect for the intricate logic of the machine. She was not interested in accolades or promotions. Her reward was the quiet satisfaction of a puzzle solved, of chaos brought to order, of a system, once broken, now humming with a smooth, efficient, almost joyful life. She had found her place, not by conforming, but by being unapologetically, brilliantly herself. The wildflower, it turned out, was not just beautiful. It was possessed of a rare and resilient strength, a strength that had the power to transform even the most sterile and unforgiving of corporate landscapes. The story of Alara Meadows and the resurrected billing system did not end with a pie from Mrs. Periwinkle, though that pie, a magnificent apple crumble, as it turned out, became a legendary symbol of her achievement within the halls of Innovatech. Alara's success with that first impossible system was merely the overture to a symphony of quiet, transformative accomplishments. One by one, she tackled Innovatech's other legacy systems, those digital behemoths that had been written off as too complex, too outdated, too terrifying to touch. With her unique blend of intuitive understanding, meticulous attention to detail, and an almost preternatural ability to listen to the silent language of code, she untangled their knots, smoothed their rough edges, and coaxed them back to vibrant, efficient life. She didn't just fix them, she often reimagined them, finding elegant, innovative solutions that not only solved the immediate problems, but also anticipated future needs. Her work began to have a tangible impact on Innovateka's bottom line. Systems that had once been a drain on resources, a source of constant frustration and inefficiency, were now running smoothly, freeing up unnecessary time, reducing errors, and improving overall productivity. Departments that had once dreaded interacting with the company's outdated software now found their workflows streamlined, their tasks simplified. The rural prodigy was, quite simply, revolutionizing the operational backbone of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, armed with little more than her grandfather's satchel, a sharp mind, and an unwavering belief in the power of elegant code. Mr. Harrison, her once harried and dismissive team lead, became her staunchest advocate. He recognized genius when he saw it, even if it came in a surprisingly unassuming package. He championed her projects, fought for her resources, and made sure that her quiet brilliance was recognized at the highest levels of the company. He even started wearing slightly more colorful shirts, a subtle, almost unconscious tribute to the young woman who had brought a much-needed breath of fresh air and a surprising dose of common sense to his high-pressure world. The colleagues who had once mocked her floral dress and sensible shoes now sought her out, not just for her technical expertise, but for her calm, thoughtful approach to problem-solving. They learned from her that true innovation wasn't always about the latest buzzwords or the flashiest new technologies, but about deep understanding, meticulous craftsmanship, and a willingness to look beyond the surface, to find the hidden logic, the underlying beauty, and even the most daunting of challenges. Alara, for her part, remained grounded, her success never breeding arrogance. She mentored younger programmers, patiently explaining complex concepts, encouraging them to trust their own intuition, to find their own unique voices in the often impersonal world of code. She started a small, informal Code Weavers Club, where programmers could share their challenges, brainstorm solutions, and explore the more artistic, creative aspects of their craft, a space where shy badgers could feel safe to emerge. The news of Alara's remarkable contributions eventually reached the ears of Innovateka's enigmatic founder and CEO, Mr. Alastair Thorne, no relation to Serafina, though perhaps a distant cousin in spirit, before his own, later, transformation. Thorne was a near-mythical figure within the company, a reclusive genius who had built his empire from garage startup and was notoriously averse to corporate bureaucracy and groupthink. He rarely involved himself in the day-to-day operations, preferring to focus on blue-sky research and the next disruptive technology. But the stories of the miracle worker on the fourth floor, the young woman who was single-handedly revitalizing the company's aging infrastructure, piqued his interest. He summoned Alara to his penthouse office, a minimalist sanctuary of glass and steel that offered breathtaking and somewhat intimidating views of the city. Alara, though understandably nervous, faced him with her usual quiet composure, her grandfather's satchel clutched in her lap. Mr. Thorne, a man of few words and piercing blue eyes, listened intently as Alara, prompted by his surprisingly gentle questions, explained her approach, her philosophy, her deep, almost spiritual, connection to the intricate logic of code. She didn't boast of her achievements. She simply spoke of her love for the work, for the challenge, for the quiet satisfaction of bringing order and elegance to complex systems. As he listened, Alastair Thorne saw not just a brilliant programmer, but a kindred spirit, a fellow innovator, someone who understood that true genius often lay not in revolution, but in the patient, meticulous, and deeply empathetic act of restoration, of making old things new and beautiful again. He didn't offer her a promotion in the traditional sense, not immediately. He knew Alara wasn't driven by titles or corner offices. Instead, he offered her something far more valuable: his trust, his resources, and the freedom to pursue her unique vision. He created a new, independent division within Innovatec, the Legacy Innovation Lab, and appointed Alara as its head. Her mandate was simple: to find the hidden potential in the old, the overlooked, the forgotten, and to weave it into the fabric of the future. It was a role perfectly suited to her unique talents, a testament to the profound impact one quiet, unassuming individual could have, even in the most impersonal of corporate behemoths. The girl from the small rural town, the one who had been mocked for her floral dress and her sensible shoes, had not just found her place. She had reshaped the landscape, quietly, patiently, line by elegant line of code. Alara Meadows, now at the helm of Innovatech's newly minted Legacy Innovation Lab, thrived. The lab became a haven for unconventional thinkers, for quiet geniuses, for those who, like Alara, saw beauty and potential where others saw only obsolescence and decay. They didn't chase the latest fads or the most hyped technologies. Instead, they delved into the forgotten corners of Innovatech's vast digital archives, unearthing overlooked algorithms, dormant patents, and elegant, albeit outdated, software architectures. Under Alara's gentle, insightful leadership, they found ways to integrate these legacy assets with cutting-edge innovations, creating hybrid solutions that were not only remarkably efficient and robust, but also possessed a unique, almost artisanal quality. They developed a reputation for solving the unsolvable problems, for tackling the challenges that other, more conventional divisions had written off as impossible. Alara never lost her humility, her quiet determination, her deep connection to the spirit of the code. She fostered an environment of collaboration, of mutual respect, where every voice was heard, every idea considered, regardless of how unconventional it might seem. Every system has a story to tell, she would often say to her team. Our job is to listen carefully enough to understand it, and then to help it write its next, most beautiful chapter. Her success, and the success of her lab, had a profound ripple effect throughout Innovatech. Other departments began to look at their own legacy systems not as burdens, but as potential sources of untapped value. A culture of respectful restoration began to permeate the company, a counterpoint to the prevailing tech industry obsession with constant disruption and the relentless pursuit of the next big thing. Innovatech, under Alara's quiet influence, began to rediscover the wisdom of its own past, the enduring value of meticulous craftsmanship, the power of elegant, sustainable solutions. Mr. Alastair Thorne, the reclusive CEO, became one of Alara's most ardent supporters. He saw in her not just a brilliant technologist, but a visionary, a leader who could inspire others not through bluster or charisma, but through quiet competence, unwavering integrity, and a profound, empathetic understanding of both machines and the people who use them. He often sought her counsel, not just on technical matters, but on broader questions of corporate culture, of innovation, of the very soul of the company he had built. He learned from her that true progress was not always about tearing down the old to make way for the new, but about finding the harmony between them, about weaving the threads of the past into the fabric of the future. And what of Alara herself? She never became a corporate titan in the traditional sense. She had no interest in power plays or boardroom politics. She remained, at heart, the quiet girl from the small rural town, the one who found solace and joy in the intricate logic of code, in the quiet satisfaction of a problem elegantly solved. She bought a small cottage on the outskirts of the city, with a little garden where she grew wildflowers. She still carried her grandfather's worn leather satchel, a reminder of her roots, of the values that had shaped her. But now, that satchel also contained the keys to a state-of-the-art innovation lab, and the quiet authority that came from knowing she was making a genuine, transformative difference in a world that had once dismissed her. Her story became a quiet legend at Innovatech, a tale told to new recruits as an example of the company's commitment to recognizing talent in all its forms. It was a story about a wildflower who had not just survived, but had flourished in the most unexpected of gardens, transforming the landscape around her with her quiet beauty, her resilient strength, and her unwavering belief in the power of listening, of understanding, of bringing order and elegance to a chaotic world. It serves as a reminder that true worth is not always loud or ostentatious. It often lies hidden in quiet corners, in unassuming individuals, waiting for the right opportunity, the right challenge, to reveal its extraordinary power. It reminds us that sometimes the most profound innovations come not from discarding the old, but from understanding its wisdom, its story, and finding new ways to help it sing. If you've ever felt like an outsider, like your unique talents are unseen or undervalued, remember Ilaire Meadows. Trust your instincts. Listen to the quiet whispers of intuition. And never, ever underestimate the power of a wildflower in a world that too often prizes only the cultivated, the conventional, the predictable. For it is often in those unexpected, underestimated places that true genius and true transformation takes root.